Oh man, and here I was thinking that I was done with the Driver franchise. Played them all, beat them all, and made videos about them all. Well, or at least I took footage of the ones I can record. But then I found out that there is another Driver game that I can make a video about, and that is Driver San Francisco. But oh no, I don't mean this San Francisco. So, even back then I knew that San Francisco was released on every 7th console generation at the time, and therefore I knew that the Nintendo Wii also got it. However, I thought it would be the same thing as this PlayStation 3 version you are seeing here, but maybe just downgraded because, well, let's be honest, the Nintendo Wii isn't as powerful as the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360. And to further complicate things, they have the exact same cover, so it would be natural to think that these would be the same game actually. But no, the Wii version is a completely different game. Oh yeah, I am not joking. There are 2 Driver San Francisco games that were released the same year but are completely different in almost every aspect. Why? I have absolutely no idea. So let's tackle the very first difference. Story. You are John Tanner, a rookie. Oh yeah. This is a prequel to the original Driver, unlike the PlayStation 3 version that is a sequel to Driver 3. So he and his mentor Emilio Alvarez are chilling in a police car until they get rammed by a fleeing car. They go into pursuit mode and chase Solomon Kane down. Oh, how do I know it's Kane? Well, because he is the first character that even talks in the game, so yeah, the story starts with him already fleeing from 2 non-police cars. But back to Tanner and Alvarez. Kane shoots at them and then this happens. Tanner survives, but Alvarez dies. However, Tanner being Tanner, he obviously won't let this glide. He goes through a police test and impresses his police chief with his driving skills, which means Tanner goes undercover. With the same car he used in the PlayStation 3 version. His goal is to infiltrate a local gang that supposedly was involved in Alvarez's death, and to do that he has to climb the ladder to the top with his driving skills. While doing so, he gets a new partner, and we all know who he is. That's right, it's Tobias Jones. But initially they don't really get along, and Tanner's personality doesn't really match his personality in the original Driver, but I will get to that later. So, with Jones in the background, Tanner manages to infiltrate the gang he was after, but it turns out there is way more to the whole story. Because a different gang comes into play in relation to Alvarez's death, and Kane himself turns out to be in the very center of, well, everything. Kane's goal is to use the gang wars that are happening for his own personal gain, and killing Alvarez was just the start of everything. Honestly, the story is actually quite interesting and probably one of the better ones in the whole franchise, even though it doesn't quite fit the story of the whole series too well. Remember when I said that I didn't buy Tanner's look and personality in the PlayStation 3 version of San Francisco because it didn't fit with what we knew about him in Driver 1, 2 and 3? In this version, Tanner is more in line with the PlayStation 3's San Francisco rather than anything else. Since this supposedly is a prequel and Tanner is 23 years old, he's a cocky and arrogant bastard that has a lot to learn. So if this is supposed to be a prequel to the original Driver, I can somewhat see how Tanner initially is a cocky bastard but then turns into a serious guy in the very first game. But considering how he is in the PlayStation 3 version of San Francisco, I mean, maybe I should just consider the first 3 driver games to be their own thing, while both San Francisco versions are some kind of alternative setting or something. Also because the following won't make that much sense actually, and to explain that I have to go back to Driver 2. In Driver 2, I got the impression that Tanner and Kane had never met before this scene right here. But as stated already, Kane is the main villain in the Wii version of San Francisco. So did both forget somehow that they met each other before, or did they act as if they never met in Driver 2? And how did Kane even escape prison in San Francisco? Because he was apprehended by the end of the game. It also doesn't make much sense that Jones is already in this game when in the original Driver he never existed, or at least was never mentioned. These 2 points alone are a reason why I think that both San Francisco games shouldn't be considered part of the Driver series actually. But hey, maybe Reflections initially intended for these 2 games to be their own IP, but Ubisoft went, nope, those are gonna be Driver games no matter what. I don't know. Ultimately though, I am not bashing the story part of the game because the story is bad. I actually think it's better than PlayStation 3's San Francisco, better than 76 and Parallel Lines. I am bashing it because as a whole, meaning as part of the main Driver franchise, it doesn't really make sense as a prequel. Now, this is a minor nitpick, let's say. Well, probably. But it seems out of character for Jones to call Tanner JT, especially considering that this is the first time they are working together. I don't know, it seems a bit too buddy-buddy to be taken seriously. So in this game there's no shift system, meaning you don't change cars on the fly or anything like the PlayStation 3 version. You have garages throughout the city to change cars. Instead of a shift system, you can use weapons again. So in a way it goes back to what previous Driver games did. You drive around in San Francisco, or rather the Bay Area, and with this physics, it's actually quite a lot of fun. Even though crashing around will be the norm for a reason that almost destroys this game entirely, even if this were not a Driver game. But I will get to that in a bit. So driving around is a lot of fun, and for whatever reason, well, maybe it's just me, the physics here felt a bit more like the original games. Obviously they still are not the original Driver physics, far from it, but on this aspect, this game actually caught me off guard, in a positive way. There still are collectibles around the city like trophies and jumps which, there are almost as pointless as Driver 76's collectibles. I say almost because here the trophies at least will give you XP and the jumps actually look kind of cool. There are not many of these to collect though, because the city isn't all that big, but it's fine the way it is. You also have some side missions to do, and you can redo the main missions if you so wish, because you gain XP if you do a mission in a certain time and clear certain objectives. If you don't want to do these, you can just clear the mission, get nothing, but still move on. However, if you gain those, then you will gain points faster. With those points, you can upgrade your abilities and weapons. Even if you just drive for fun around the city, there will be some thugs driving around that you can stop yourself to gain extra EXP. But the funny part here is, you are the only one reacting to them at all because, well, just look at this. That thug is quite literally bumping the police car, but the cop doesn't care one bit, which is, weird. In fact, the cops barely react to anything, even you. You can do whatever you want and they won't give a shit, unless you shoot or crash onto them full force. You may say that it's because they know Tanner is in the car, but this happens with Jones and Kane as well. So the cops are mostly useless, but once they start to chase, they will almost remind you of the cops from the original Driver, and yes, they can be brutal. And honestly, the cops and other enemies can be quite smart as well. They can give you a run for your money at times, which would be a positive, but overall it tends to be a negative. Reason for that is that your car seems really slow in comparison to others, even while using boost, which is... I don't know, it's weird. But I've already mentioned something here that I actually quite like. It's the fact that throughout the story you play chapters as John Tanner, Tobias Jones, and even Solomon Kane. This is a bit similar to what I've said should have been done in the PlayStation 3 version instead of doing some irrelevant side quests as Japanese kids or a movie crew, playing from different perspectives of the main characters. In this version, Jones is helping Tanner out while Kane is, well, obviously, trying to do his own thing and screw everybody. Now, graphically, of course, it cannot be compared with the PlayStation 3 version, but for the Wii, I think it looks quite fine and it has style. I like these comic book style cutscenes, which was something I also praised in Driver 76, and also like this grainy movie effect it's called, I think, during some scenes. On this aspect, I even prefer this over the PlayStation 3 version. Oh, and do you remember this name? Oh yeah, it's Ray's Garage, which was a character from Driver 76 and Parallel Lines. The background music actually is excellent, with very nice tracks that fit the vibe and scenes quite well. This is something I have been mostly praising throughout the Driver franchise, and they deserve it. But the sound design can be really off in this one, because listen to this. Even though I am driving around on the street, it sounds like I am driving in a garage or something. This doesn't happen once, this happens multiple times for some reason. But the thing that almost destroys this game is this. This is the reason why I don't like to play all that often on the Wii. It's because these damn gimmick controls, they simply aren't really fun. Well, of course it depends on the game, and sadly no, you cannot use this controller at all, because throughout the game you necessarily need to do something with the damn Wiimote. So in some missions you have to shoot around and you need this to do that. You shoot by pressing a button, which isn't the problem, but in general, to reload you have to do this. What happens oftentimes is, as soon as I reload, I tend to lose track of the cursor, and that can get really annoying. Similar happens when you shoot in slow motion. This could be a problem that only I have, but really I got really pissed off at times because a mission happens where I have to aim around and I often have to search for the damn cursor like a fucking idiot. You will also need the cursor if you have to hack the enemy's radio or phone to gain information. This one isn't too bad since you don't have to reload anything, you just need to point at the car long enough to complete this circle. Just don't be too far from the car and you are good. Similar to the PlayStation 3 version, you can also ram other cars. For that, you need to do this. Now, that wouldn't be that bad, but here you can also ram cars like this. And later in the game, for whatever reason, I don't know, I tended to ram to the side when I wanted to ram forward, just because I hold the controller slightly sideways. Again, this might just be a me problem, and overall it did not happen all too often, but when it happened, I wanted to throw the controller out of the fucking window. To use boost, you need to use this controller and swing forward. In itself, this wasn't that bad. What annoyed me with this controller, or this side of the Wiimote, I don't know, wasn't even the analog stick itself, even though I have to drive with it. Yes, I would have preferred the D-pad over the analog stick, but whatever. What got annoying is that you use this controller to steer, brake and fucking accelerate. And for a hand like mine, not only is the controller too small and somewhat uncomfortable, but since you have to accelerate with this button, my finger keeps sliding down while steering. This was the most frustrating part for me because I always had to fight against a sliding index finger. Yes, I've tried to accelerate with my middle finger, but it was far worse. My hand is just too big for this controller. You can't use weapons in the beginning, but later you will be able to use them. 4 in total. However, you won't be able to use them whenever. If this meter is down, you will not be able to use any weapon, but similar to the PlayStation 3 version where you got WP for doing stunts like drifting, near missing and such, in here you will refill both meters if you do stunts. And don't mind me nearly one-shotting thugs at this point. I can do this because these thugs that drive around the city are weaker than the main story thugs, and my pistol was upgraded to max at this point. I mean, it's not that the difficulty of the game itself is too high or anything, because I would say that the difficulty is on the same level as the PlayStation 3 version. But the game will seem difficult, especially at first, because of the controller, at least if you are not used to the Wiimote yet, which is probably why these wrenches are all over the city and constantly respawn, as if the developers knew that driving around with this controller would be rather painful and somewhat annoying. I mean, while I have played the Nintendo Wii a few times before, I never actually owned one up until recently. And sure, maybe I'm just not used to the Wiimote yet, who knows. Look, my major issue with the Wii version of San Francisco are the controls, or rather the controller itself. All these damn motion systems the game uses, especially driving on 2 wheels, were not necessary. Oh yeah, you can drive on 2 wheels. However, I've beat the whole game and collected everything, and I never had to use this 2-wheel ability once. When I used it, it was just for fun. I mean, I understand what the developers were trying to do with the console, and they had some really good ideas here regarding the mechanics, but sometimes less is more. Because if it weren't for the controls, the Wii version would easily be on par with the PlayStation 3 version, maybe slightly better, at least for me. As a whole though, this is still a good game for the Nintendo Wii, so don't get me wrong, and the game even manages to do some things better than the PlayStation 3 version, like playing the story as Tanner, Jones and Kane. But still, this game should have been called something other than Driver San Francisco when it's an entirely different game. Heck, Driver 76 and Parallel Lines have more similarities than both San Francisco games, and yet they have different titles.